You're tuning into the Journey to Your Best Self podcast, where we explore the past holistic well being, personal growth, and living a fulfilling life. Each episode, we bring you insightful conversations, practical tools, and inspiring stories to help you integrate your mind, body, and spirit on your journey to becoming your best self. Let's dive in and embark on this journey together. Welcome back to the Journey to Your Best Self podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian O'Neill, joined by my co-host and one of your own self's resident experts, hypnotherapist, certified life coach, and yoga instructor, and fortunately for her, my sister, Tara O'Neill. Let's embark on this journey together. Today, we are thrilled and privileged and honored, and I'm looking forward to learn a lot from Dr. Amy Rosner. She's going to be here, and let me give you a little bit about her background. She is not only a PhD in experimental neuropsychology, but also a certified hypnotherapist and NLP practitioner. With a deep compassion for mind-body connection, Amy has dedicated her career to helping individuals outsmart their brains, rewrite their life stories, and unlock new possibilities for success. Amy's latest book, Reconstructing Reality, Outsmarting the Brain to Rewrite Our Life Stories, has been a #1 Amazon bestseller since its release. Her unique approach, blending neuroscience, hypnotherapy, and personal empowerment, has been transformative to many, and we're eager to dive in to her insights today. So please welcome us and please join us in welcoming Dr. Amy Rosner to the show. Welcome aboard.
Thank you very much for having me. I am really excited to talk to you guys today.
Yeah, it is a privilege. Obviously, we have some commonality, so I'm a little starstruck and so excited to hear all of the new things you've been up to and more about the book, which I'm very close to finishing, but it's a keep on your bedside book, right? Because you can always go back. You need those refreshers, those reminders, even though I studied a lot of this, I'm finding new gems in it. It's like, oh, I either forgot this, or oh, I didn't think about it this way. So can't wait to dive in.
That's good. I was hoping you didn't mean that it was putting you to sleep.
Although
that might be good too.
I'm glad I supplemented with the more of a reference. Once you finish the book, you want to keep going back to it in that sense of a book.
Actually, that's a really good time to read things right before you go to sleep because you retain more information that way. So
yeah, I mean, that's
just a little nugget.
That's a good place to start, throwing out some suggestions for our audience and listeners of, why is that time right before bed good for reading, one, and the subconscious, and maybe even dreaming?
Yeah, well, thanks for the softball pitch. Yeah, we're actually in a hypnotic state during that time, right? So it's a good time to do anything that you've been having trouble doing during waking hours because your brain is in a different state as you go into a hypnagogic state as you fall into sleep. And then when you wake up, you go into a hypnopompic state to wake up. So I always find it interesting when people say that they can't be hypnotized or they're worried they can't be hypnotized because we're all hypnotizing ourselves at least twice a day. There are many times in which we're in that hypnotic state. It's just a natural brain state. And our brain will put us in that state in various situations. If we're startled, if we're overwhelmed, if we're bored, most hypnotherapists will use inductions that basically bore people into hypnosis. I tried to startle one time with an older lady, and I thought that I might have given her a heart attack with the startle, and I thought, okay, I'm not using that anymore. So I use boredom more than anything else. But that's a great time to try to solidify ideas in your head, try to change some connections, do some a type of neuroplasticity, right, where we're changing connections, we're changing patterns of behavior, of self-talk, of anything really. Your brain's job 24/7 is just to make, delete, and change the strength of connections between different areas. And A lot of that is done without your input, but you can actually define a direction and move in that direction. And you can use those self-hypnosis principles right before you go to bed to either solidify programming that has been changed recently, or to actually do some reprogramming from scratch right then and there. So that's one of the greatest times during the day for self time. Anything you want to do for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And just one thing real quick, because I want people to maybe think of it, they're reprogramming all the time, right? We're
24/7. That's all your brain does.
Right.
Yep.
So when we say, even when we use words like manifestation, we're manifesting all the time. We're reprogramming all the time. What we're trying to do is empower people to learn about how their brain works. And so I would love for people to think in the back of their minds, like, oh, I'm already doing it. Now I'm just going to consciously take control over it.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, that's my whole thing is about empowerment. My entire practice is and book and everything else, everything I do is about empowering other people to make use of these kinds of techniques, to easily make some changes that maybe they've had a difficult time with. And we hear, I don't know, I guess we hear a lot about hypnosis, maybe not, but what we do here is usually not correct in one way or another. And we see it on TV and in the movies and stuff. And, some people are actually afraid of it, but it's like, and people, will say, oh, I don't believe in hypnosis, but it's like saying you don't believe in gravity. It's a natural process that's happening whether you want it to or not, whether you believe in it or not. Science doesn't care what you believe, it is. And so the more you understand what's actually happening in your head, the more you can do for yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then
So,
now let's
did
have
you
Brian get
go
back
ahead?
to maybe he'll go a little bit more linearly and ask you how you got started here. Brian?
Yeah, well, you had said people do question things that they're unfamiliar with, right? And then there may be a reputation that hypnosis has had, coming from education, right? And being in psychology and on college campuses, and maybe in a more traditional capacity with your approach to the brain. Did you face a lot of doubters before you made this more holistic approach to things? Before, was there um, a moment where things changed for you and you started to see things on numerous levels in a much more well-rounded way? And were there doubters back then when you started to pursue the different avenues, especially, I mean, even something like neuroplasticity, which you mentioned? Traditionally, the brain was thought to be finite, like it's finished. There's not going to be any malleability. There's not going to be any change that it's really capable of. It's not going to repair itself, right? For decades and forever, that was just the way it was thought, right? Once you had an issue with the brain, there was no change, or there was no growth
You're born
possible.
with all the brain cells you're ever going to have, and it's only going to go
Right,
downhill from there.
exactly. And it's
Right?
only going to go, you're only going to lose them,
Yeah.
you can't gain them, right? So that's what everyone hears, even now growing up. So two-parter. Did you face a lot of doubters within education in those maybe more traditional spaces? And was there a moment, an aha or revelatory moment, where you're like, oh, there's more than in this classroom or in these books that I've been educated with?
Yeah. So, kind of a two-parter. So, I came kind of a roundabout way into hypnotherapy. I had been a college professor in various psychology departments, and I was at the point of deciding, do I really want to go for tenure and keep doing this for the rest of my life? And the answer was no, I didn't. I kept feeling like, if I teach one more intro psych class, I'm going to feel like I'm dying a slow death. And, I can't do this for the next 30 years, and I love teaching. Don't get me wrong. That's like my big thing. I'm more of a teacher than anything else. But I'm also pretty creative, and I've been a lifetime artist and mostly a painter. And so, part of me was feeling like I was just kind of growing roots through the bottom of my chair, I just wanted to do something different. And I didn't resonate with psychotherapy for various reasons. I didn't like seeing people as broken. So I went the experimental route. I had my choice, and I went the experimental route. And got to know just how the brain works so that I could, kind of take off from there. And I was doing research, traditional like rat research, making holes in rat heads and taking out brain parts and having them do stuff and see how that impacted them. And I wound up with a big allergy to the rats, and I didn't really want to be cutting up rats for the rest of my life. And so it just everything kind of led me out of that more traditional academic setting. And then I bounced around for a bit in the business world and in various settings, and came back around where my heart was, which was psychology, only in a very different way. I was actually selling some artwork at a show, and someone came up to me who was a life coach, and I had never heard of life coaching. So this is how long ago I got my degree. I know I'm dating myself, but it was a new thing for me. Nobody ever talked about life coaching in academic circles. And so, I thought I'm coming from this kind of high horse of neuroscience, and I'm thinking, yeah, okay, well, she wanted to trade me some sessions for some artwork. And I'm like, well, I'll try anything once, yeah, sure. Let's try this life coaching stuff. And I worked with her for a year, and it was absolutely transformational for me. And I experienced some things that I didn't actually know existed, which was really great. I thought it was the best self-improvement tool that I had ever experienced. And I kept thinking, boy, it would be really cool to be able to do this for other people. And so that got my interest peaked in coaching. And then I did wind up getting into coaching, and there were these, blocks that you come up with. People are trying to get past these blocks, and it's very difficult with a conscious paradigm like coaching, if that's all you're doing, to get someone past a block, which is almost certainly going to be a subconscious thing. And so, you're kind of ships passing in the night if you're trying to, get something that's deep down and you're staying on the surface. And so it didn't take long before I decided, all right, I need, to add some hypnotherapy to this, because having studied the brain, we didn't spend a lot of time on hypnosis or hypnotherapy. It was more, receptors and psychopharmaceuticals and things of that nature, different parts of the brain and what they do. And so the more I got to know, there was a program actually, a great program nearby. And I knew someone who was working at that institution, and talked to her a bit. And I thought, this is really resonating with me as a brain scientist. This makes a whole lot more sense than, what I learned in my, coaching program. And so I started hypnotherapy training, and my training program was more medical in nature. The main people in the program were, one was an EMT, another was the head of emergency pediatrics at a major university. So one was a brain surgeon that was retired and became a full-time hypnotherapist. So my mentors were in the medical and scientific community, and that's just the way I liked it, because that's where I came from. So that really kind of led me back into psychology, and I wound up staying there and then just developing that. And that was about 11 years ago. And since then, I've just been getting creative with my practice and building up much more than I ever thought I could. I'm not using the same scripts that I learned or any of that kind of stuff. I'm doing my own thing, created my own techniques and, versions of other techniques that have been around forever. So it's now my whole thing is just trying to, get the word out and let people know, hey, you're actually engaged in hypnotic phenomenon much more often than you think. And a lot of practitioners are as well with their clients, only some of them are making use of that. And so, you don't have to be counted down from 10 down to 1 to go into a hypnotic state, to go into a trance state. You can go like that. Dave Ellman, for example, made a living of teaching people how to go like that into trance state, right? He was an entertainer that wound up training therapists to do this. So that half of the session wasn't spent trying to get someone in a hypnotic state, right? But people think it's difficult. They think, oh, this is something unnatural, and it's difficult. And what I've come to find is I've gone through my practice and, published my first book, which was about 10 years ago as a journal, but there were only about 10 pages of my writing, and it took probably 20 years to be able to write those 10 pages, because it took getting into this, firmly, in order for me to feel like I had really a decent understanding of the way the brain worked. And I'm not saying I, understand, more than neuroscientists or anybody else do, and we have tons we don't know about it. But I felt like I got a much more complete education in how the brain worked after I had been doing this practice for a while. And that's when I felt like I could start actually talking to other people about it. So I started putting the word out. And my latest book is tying all that together, what I've learned in my practice over the years, tied into the neuroscience. And there's a ton of research on hypnotherapy, a ton. In fact, if you look at the references in my book, they're almost all review studies, because my book is not a research review. I'm not going to go through every little thing. It's just to get the word out to the public. But those review studies, I mean, there are tons of studies that are being reviewed in each of those studies. So people think it's a pseudoscientific thing, but it's not. There is a lot of science behind this, and there has been for quite a few years now. So it's kind of a natural extension of where I was, only in a direction that I'm a lot more comfortable with and that resonates a lot more with me.
Excellent. Awesome. Yeah. What do you think? Do you think that the reason that people that are experts in the brain, it's such a complex and endless labyrinth, right? That we're trying to we find our way through. The reason that you said getting the word out is what's the hesitation that many have on your side of things, that the public, they have maybe a built-in excuse of some just ignorance of not knowing enough, or they're not steeped in brain science. But what's the hesitation still that many members of your old space might have?
Yeah, and to add to that, the world of academia, I know, can be complicated for some of these more older or more often think pseudosciency. But what about, could you even add to that, like how David Spiegel's work, and some of the great things that are happening at Stanford? I mean, even Andrew Huberman is now very vocal about the benefits of it. So can you speak to the hesitation and also the promise of, like, the research is out there? I'm associated with University of California, San Diego's they have a light program. And they have 11 years of research of the same people doing this hypnosis work. So, yeah, could you speak to both sides, the hesitation in the world of academia and in the science sector, but also the people that
The
are
building it, the growing evidence,
actually,
the
yeah.
body of evidence.
Yeah. There's actually it's building fast. So I think a lot of the hesitation has to do with a number of things. One is, the psychotherapy community is a big machine, and it doesn't turn on a dime. And so, getting this behemoth of, theory to start turning a little bit based on principles that, yes, there's a lot of research, but it's very difficult to get a lot in terms of, cause and effect, conclusions from this stuff, because there's only so much you can manipulate within a given study like that. So experimental research is difficult, and it's going to be more on the applied level, of course, because you can't, go into somebody's head and make some changes. We got ethics against that, right? So you can only assume that what you're doing may be making a difference, maybe making some change, and then go from there. So I think it's an area that a lot of people, it's very messy. It's a very messy area in terms of science, and so I think a lot of researchers would like to stay away from that and look at something like a D2 receptor or something, which is a lot easier. It's a lot more simple to deal with.
Yeah.
Right. So there's that element. The people that are studying it are doing some great research, and I tip my hat to every one of them. Thank you for doing that. And hearing people like Andrew Huberman, for example, and David Spiegel talk about the virtues of hypnotherapy is very influential. A lot of people look up to those guys and a number of other people. Huberman's gotten just this monster following in social media, and so for him to say something that other people are going to be listening to is very influential. I did actually one of his and I love Huberman. I'm a huge fan.
Yeah.
I listen to him all the time. Actually, one of his podcasts got me uptight and wanting it. It gave me the impetus to publish this book, and and it was because they were talking about trauma, and almost everybody I see, probably everybody I see, is coming in for some kind of trauma related work. And in my opinion, as someone who's a hypnotherapist and not a clinician, I believe hypnotherapy and NLP, these subconscious oriented brain hacks, are absolutely the best thing anybody can try for trauma and should be everybody's first stop. Maybe it'll get rid of it for you. Maybe it'll make a dent. Maybe it won't do anything, in which case, go look to traditional therapy or medication or whatever else there is. But I think it's a great first stop, because the only side effects of this stuff are things like, self-empowerment and confidence and, really good, results that anybody would want more of.
That's an amazing point.
And the more you work with people and the better they feel about themselves, then they're like, oh wow, I never thought I could change how I felt about that, but I do feel better about it, and if I could change that, I can change this, and I can change this, and I can change this, right? And so it snowballs in a great way of really upping somebody's self-esteem. So that's the side effects. That's great. The other thing is it's not something that is really going to hurt anybody. Now there are better and worse ways, I think, to come about this, but really, I mean, there are no licensing boards for this because nobody gets hurt by this. They're not going to states are not going to spend a bunch of money on a licensing board for something that the biggest complaint is, I wanted my money back and she didn't give it to me. Right. So it's just not going to happen, and it shouldn't happen. And there's no reason for it. But the downside of that, of the lack of licensing, is that we do get a lot of yahoos in this business that are, I think, giving us a bad name. And I think they're going beyond their scope of practice. I think they are taking advantage of people for financial gain. And they're by no means not the majority of people in this field, but they exist. And because of that, and I mean, there are counselors I think shouldn't have their licenses anymore, and people like that. But I mean, it's true in any field, anywhere. There are going to be people that are good at what they do and others that are, not really, performing ethically. But I think that because it's not mainstream, it's off on the fringes, and it's not something that you really hear about very much for serious issues like trauma. That it gives it a bad name, and people will see it, kind of want to keep their distance from it. And I think a lot of academia has done that. But when I heard Dr. Huberman talking about it in the trauma podcast that he had, he said that he had talked to a number of his friends in the clinical space and the traditional psychotherapy, and their opinion was the best thing you can do for trauma is to basically talk about it a lot, just a lot of talk therapy. And it just made me mad, not because he said that, because that's true. What he said was absolutely true, that's the opinion you're going to get from that community. What's not great, in my opinion, is that with that talk therapy, and this includes coaching, by the way, any kind of conscious dialogue is not going to be getting into the source of the trauma. It's not going to be able to help someone 100%, because there's going to be a body component that is completely missing. And you can get a good perspective, you can get understanding, but you can understand everything there is about something and not change how you feel about it at all. So, very often, and I'm sure, Tara, you've seen this in your practice, you'll have somebody come in and say that they want to stop feeling a certain way, and you talk to them about the situation, and they have a perfectly sound understanding of the situation. You're not going to be able to use logic to help them understand it better, because they understand it perfectly fine. It's just that their feelings are not on the same level as their understanding. And so what we can do when we dive into the subconscious and mess around in there is we can bring that emotional understanding up to the intellectual.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many wonderful things that I could say. The old paradigm, oh, that trauma can be healed through talk therapy, I think we can agree is just not true, right?
And I think the psychotherapy community is coming around because there are more people doing what some people call somatic
Yeah,
psychotherapy, which can be extremely effective for
yeah,
trauma. I checked, this was a few years ago, but I checked here in the Phoenix metropolitan area, and there was only one therapist that did that here.
yeah.
So that's how I would imagine there are probably a few more now.
Hmm.
But again, that ship doesn't, turn on
Right,
a dime.
right.
So but you have to have that physical component, and that's coming from the psychiatric community. Actually,
Yes.
it's not just my opinion
Oh,
or what
sure.
I've noticed in my practice.
Right.
This is actually coming from that community. So yeah, I think it's getting more, understood that just staying on this conscious level is limited.
Right.
And from a brain researcher perspective, I hate the just talk about it a lot idea, because you're just strengthening those
Right.
connections that you don't want to be focused on, right?
Right.
And you don't get what you want, you get what you focus on and expect.
Right.
So you
So
need to be careful what you're focusing on.
absolutely, absolutely. So it's like rewriting your story yes, you need to find out the truth of your story, because consciously sometimes that's not even the truth of the story. So I will often, a lot of times clients, it will grease the wheels by going to therapy, and then they'll plateau. Maybe you found that, well, okay, I realize that this is actually what happened, I'm willing to admit this, or will not lie to myself, I want to go deeper now, can you help me? And that's what I find, where for some people it can in tandem. You could do traditional talk therapy as well, but I do love your approach. Similarly, it has the holistic, right? It has the life coaching, the subconscious work, and the somatic. So it's getting going, attacking from, not attacking, but approaching it from all angles seems to be where it the research is supporting what you might have known 10, 15 years ago. So that's beautiful, and that's what I love about the book. It's not saying that your story is doesn't matter or it's not true, but that you can recognize it and then create a new story, a new dialogue, and you don't have to.
And people don't realize we're creating new stories all the time. We are rewriting our stories constantly, because it's not like when you bring up a memory, it's not like bringing up, a photo on your computer. Like it's not going to be the same every time. In fact, you're going to change it every time, because the brain works by prediction and reconstruction. That is how all brain activity, works. And so if we predict a certain outcome based on the concepts that we have in our heads, and that outcome, there's some error between the prediction and what actually happens. That prediction error gets acknowledged by the brain, and reconstruction occurs, and that's a form of neuroplasticity. And so the brain is going to correct anything that may be off, so that the next interaction in that kind of situation is going to hopefully be more correct, or have a better outcome in some way. And so if you can tap into that natural reconstructive process, which is what these subconscious brain hacks having to do with hypnosis and NLP do, then we're tapping into that natural way that the brain works.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not anything weird, and it's not anything difficult, because you're tapping into exactly what's happening, what's going on neurologically, and you're not trying to get that brain to do anything weird. You're just saying, hey, yeah, do what you're doing, only do it over here this way,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
so when you're a little kid and you catch a little fish and it's like 4 inches long, and then you tell the story for 40 years and it becomes a foot and a half long, because you're proud of that fish.
Right.
You're reconstructing that every time you tell it, and that fish gets bigger and bigger every time, and you would swear that's the reality, when really the correct situation as it actually occurred is probably quite different. But you've grown it into this, and the same thing happens with negative events.
Mm-hmm.
If your father said something to you when you were 10 that was supposed to be out of love and to help you, but your little 10-year-old, tacky brain that's not very well developed yet took it in a negative way. And then for 40 years, you're telling yourself this story about making it worse and worse and worse. And this becomes this very negative thing about how, your father didn't, approve of you or something like that. And a whole bunch of issues that coincides with that. Then, we're doing that to ourselves, but it's not a conscious thing. It's unconscious. Our brain is trying to figure out how to work best with the world. And a lot of that has to do with how we see ourselves. And so we're rewriting our life stories all the time in the formal kind of hypnotherapy, practitioner situation. You can actually rewrite stories with the ending you want, or with the feeling that you want to come out of those stories.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'll have clients that will say, like, I look forward to coming to hypnotherapy, but I can't stand going to my therapist. And it's like,
I have had people who they will book sessions for hypno right after their therapy sessions,
yeah,
because they feel like they need help after the therapy
yeah,
session, and then they come in and we can deal
they're
with whatever
so stressed
came
out.
up that felt bad from therapy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. And because it is an element of strengthening that hurt, right?
Yeah, it is. So when you keep talking about what's bothering you, then you're just going to make those connections stronger and stronger and stronger. So what we want to do instead is, okay, let's just touch on this negative feeling you have, about yourself, for example, and let's see how we can, change that. We're just going to touch on it, and then, okay, let that go. Now let's go to an event in your life that felt really good, and you felt really empowered, and you were the man, right? And then let's, get those feelings going all through you, and now let's use those good feelings to go change those bad feelings, reconstruct that memory, so that those bad feelings, that because we deal with arousal and affect, right? And so we're changing the arousal level of that event to bring you down in arousal, so that you're feeling more calm and more in control, and we're changing the valence of the affect from negative to neutral, or sometimes even positive. I had someone who actually was discussing the first time her husband raped her. And it was a horrific situation, and we were actually reprogramming. I've come up with some techniques to actively reprogram as we go through that entire process. And so no induction or anything. They're already in a hypnotic state when they're talking about stuff like that. So it's a matter of capitalizing on that and saying, okay, let's keep that arousal level going down whenever it gets higher. Let's do a few things to bring it down, and then keep her in this nice window of arousal as she goes through the story. And then make with mostly like mindfulness and cognitive dissonance are tools I use to help people see, oh, I feel really unsafe, but okay, look around you. It's just me. Are you safe? Well, yeah. Okay, so the brain is going, okay, I can't be safe and unsafe at the same time in this situation, so that has to change, right? And so there are some really simple things you can do to actively change those qualities of arousal and affect, those interoceptive qualities as we go through a session, just going through someone, telling a narrative of a traumatic event. And then at the end of it, this person said, I asked how it felt, go back, let's talk about the beginning again, and let's go back. How does it feel? And she was laughing, and she said, I actually feel empowered.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so that was a positive, went from extremely negative to actually positive, which is a leap that it's difficult to imagine, but that's how quickly and how completely you can make those changes when you're diving into the subconscious and you're actually tapping into that natural reconstructive process.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what that's connecting the mind and the body again, right?
Well, people forget the brain is part of the body.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So aside from people, going to hypnotherapy, and we'll talk about where they can get your resources, what can they do? Say, let's talk about the complaining, right? So sometimes we say, oh, well, I'm just venting, but it really becomes complaints that we repeat over and over. What can our audience or people do to self-correct that?
So there's a great exercise, and if you do it out loud with other people, you're going to annoy everybody. But that might be fun,
Yeah.
just for the sake of it. But it's something that I learned in my hypnotherapy training program, and there are a million different ways to do this. But the way we did it was we called it the cancel exercise. And so whenever you thought something negative about yourself or heard yourself say something negative about yourself or anybody else or the situation or whatever, any kind of complaint, immediately tell yourself cancel to stop that train from continuing down that track, and then reframe it, as we say in coaching, rephrase it in a positive way, and that is moving you onto a more positive track. And so if you tell yourself, oh, I just can't do this, cancel, I am doing this better and better every day.
Yeah.
Right. And the more you go and you back and you go out a different direction, then the more your brain gets used to that. And it only took us like an hour we were doing this to one another, canceling each other. And I was getting really annoyed because I was getting canceled all the time. And I thought I was the most positive person I knew. But when you do that, you really understand what a negative internal environment you're making for yourself in your head. And you live there 24/7.
Yeah.
So it's a great exercise. Just start trying, and you're going to miss a bunch of them to begin with, but try to catch the times that you hear yourself complaining either internally or aloud. And when you catch one, say cancel, and reframe it in a positive way. That includes things like I should do this. No shoulding on yourself. No, I should do this, I should do that, or I should do it this way. Should is a negative term. No, I need to. No, I've got to. No, I have to. Move all of that aside and instead say I want to. And people are like, well, what if I don't? Like, I have to do the dishes, I should do the dishes, but I don't want to do the dishes. Okay, well, do you want to have clean dishes to eat off of? Well, yeah. Okay, so you can get in under the radar. You have to get sneaky with brains. You really do. You have to get sneaky with it. Brains are smart, so you got to get sneaky with them. And so if you instead, I should do the dishes, cancel, I want to do the dishes. If you actually feel what's going on when you say that, if you say I should do the dishes or something that you don't want to do, it's going to feel like you're putting some other kind of stressor on the pile, right? It's just one more thing you have to do. It's going to increase your stress level, and then you're going to be less likely to do it. You're going to procrastinate when your stress level gets up there because your brain is keeping you away from the stressful stuff, saying don't do that because that's a stressor, so just let that go. And then at some point you have to do it, and then it's a real problem, right? Then you feel terrible. You're all upset that you have to do the dishes. But if you instead say, I want to do the dishes, then that part of your brain that's going like, but I don't like doing the dishes, but we want to have clean dishes. So, okay, I guess we want to do the dishes. You can fly right under the radar there and get in there, sneak in there, and your brain won't decide that it's untrue. If your brain knows that you're lying to it, it's not going to work, whatever that is. Oh, I'm going to make $100,000 more this year. If you know that's not going to happen, your brain's going to be there. Okay, yeah, whatever. Like, let us know when. Nothing's going to happen. Right? Because it knows when you're lying. It's your brain. Right? It's smart.
For sure. I love that. Yeah, I'll sometimes try to do the I get to. Well, I get to do the dishes,
That's good. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
But I want to might be a stepping stone to I get to. So yeah, I think like you said, because
they're both positive. Yeah. As long as it's positive, it's creating an opportunity is what it's doing.
Yeah.
So that's always a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the cancel. That's so great. I actually my hypnosis teacher taught me when you hear something that is negative or could change, like could amplify a negative belief, to actually go cancel with your arms. And I guess the somatic part of it strengthens the cancel. So
that's fine. I mean, all of it works. A lot of therapists I know use a stop sign, visualize a stop sign when that happens, and then stop and go back. It doesn't matter how you do it. It's going to be effective, any of those ways, because you're actually moving, tracks. You're consciously moving those tracks.
And how about the morning? Can you share your morning routine, or some elements or tips or tricks for our viewers that want to get started in that positive mindset, or at least the reframing momentum?
Sure. Well, my day starts with a 74 pounds of love pit bull body slamming me to get up and make him breakfast. So, and he doesn't let me sleep past about, well, it's about 5:15 or so that he's on me. And then if I tell him to go away, he's got a built-in snooze alarm that cannot be turned off. And so he'll come back in about 15 or 20 minutes and he'll do it again. And so eventually I'll get up and I'll go get him some breakfast and make myself some tea. And the whole time that I'm up, you're in that hypnopompic state as soon as you open your eyes. You're not completely, aware of everything yet. You're just, waking up. I feel like I stay in that state for about 2 hours after waking up, but maybe I just feel like that. But you're more susceptible to what's going on around you and what you're telling yourself during that time.
Mm.
So one of the really cool things to do is to, maybe tell yourself something like, all right, I get up and do something fun today. I really like the people I'm going to have sessions with today, or I like, something like that, something to start the day off on a positive note, or, oh, it's a really nice day out there today. This is going to be a good day. Something you're telling yourself that in that hypnopompic state, it's going to get in, suggestions work at any time, but they work better when you're in that hypnotic state. Research doesn't quite bear that out, but I firmly believe that to be the case just from what I've seen in my practice. And so that's part of it. And then just getting up and moving. So, sometimes people can languish in bed and they might try to, tell themselves something positive, but if they're feeling some negative things, they can just hang out there and wallow for a while. And so I think getting up and moving and just starting your day, and your body wants to do that anyway. You're getting a big burst of cortisol at that period of time. Your body wants you up and moving, right? So you're just getting up and moving and being positive or enjoying what you see out there. Be mindful. Anything you see, notice, hey, there's a really cool way that the light's coming in from the window this morning, or something like that. Notice some of those mundane things that we don't usually pay attention to, but that actually provide us with some of the greatest joy we could ever have. So it's a really great way to move into more a positive place during that time that we're already in that hypnotic state, and it can really get in and make a big difference. And then, by the time I feed the dog and get my tea, then I'm back in bed with the computer on, sitting up with the computer on my lap, and I'm doing something. I'm writing, I'm doing marketing, I'm doing whatever. That's an incredibly creative and productive time for me, is the next couple of hours that I'm there in that place. So I'm in that hypnotic state. That's where creative thinking occurs. That's where productivity really ramps up. And that just helps you get work done a lot smarter and faster. So you're not working as hard or, for an extended period of time to try to get things done. So
yeah. And can you actually expand on that in with the cortisol spike, right? So you want that little bit of downtime to kind of wake up, have the positive thoughts, have the mindfulness, but then like we can optimize that higher cortisol focus area that sometimes, I mean, I'm going to throw out 10 a.m. like might be like the peakish. Can you explain that in the science way where we can optimize that time?
Sure. So it's going to be roughly like 30 to 45 minutes after you wake up, or after dawn, it depends when you wake up. And some people call it the dawn effect, where you've got this jolt of cortisol that hits your system, and it's your brain's way of getting you up and going first thing in the morning.
Okay.
And in fact, that should be the highest cortisol you should have for the entire day. It should continue to go down throughout the day, and then at the end of the day, it should be the lowest that it is when you're going to sleep. So at the beginning of the day, shortly after you wake up, just shy of an hour or so, about 45 minutes or so after you wake up, that's going to be your cortisol keeps rising to that point, and that should be the peak point during the day. And so anything you want to do that is going to be utilizing that stress hormone, that's a great time to do it. So this is one of the reasons that a lot of people enjoy exercising in the morning as opposed to waiting until later in the day, because they've naturally got that, kick in the pants from their brain with the cortisol Anything that you want to be able to do that is kind of on automatic pilot, where nothing's going to committee in your head. You don't need any kind of creative thinking or problem solving or anything, because those are best in lower cortisol situations, in more hypnotic situations. But anything that you would like to just rote automatic kind of stuff to get done, answer your emails, do various things like that, it's a really good time to take care of that stuff, and you can really get into a rhythm of getting that stuff done, and you've got the energy to do it. So those kinds of tasks can be really good. Like I said, exercise is a great time for exercise. Exercise is a stressful event on your body, and so that cortisol just helps that. And then, of course, in the long run, it helps to reduce your basal stress level. But in the moment when you're exercising, it's a stressful event. So that's a really good way to utilize that cortisol.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And then one more question before Brian chimes in. That being said, if we are on this rhythm, we're trying to tap into maybe more of our circadian rhythm and the hypnagogic states, creativity. Some people are, oh, I'm not creative, or we're all creative in some way when we cultivate it. What time of day or what set or setting can we use to help nudge us towards that creativity?
So there can be some big individual differences in the time of day that's most creative for people. But the bottom line is creative thinking is a hypnotic state. It's problem solving is what it is. It's innovation. And so you want to be in, a low cortisol state for that. So trying to be really creative, even though you have a lot of energy first thing in the morning, you may not be producing the most creative stuff. You're probably going to be looking at variations on a theme of things you've already done. But if you really want to get into that problem solving, the creative process, for me anyway, as I teach it, is it starts out as a conscious activity, and you're getting all the information and skills and anything else you need for that creative activity or to solve that problem, and you're doing everything you can to think about it in different ways, and at some point your brain goes, all right, I'm done, I've had enough, I can't think about this anymore. And what most people feel like at that point is that they've failed. They failed to come up with an answer. But really, they're just starting to come up with an answer. So if you feel like that's the failure point, then you are missing out on the good stuff, because that is your brain saying, all right, it's time to relegate this to the subconscious mind for further processing. And that subconscious mind, when that whole brain, especially when that right hemisphere is dominant for that task, which to me, getting into that hypnotic state is the shifting of dominance, cortical dominance from left to right. And once that happens, then that right is really good about encouraging all of the brain to work together. And so the left is going to keep the right from having as much input in activities. But when the right is in charge, that whole brain is working together. And it's all working to solve whatever these, issues are, problems, whether it's what to do with this painting, or how to change a policy at work, or whatever, what to do with my mother-in-law, whatever it might be. It's going to be, your whole brain is going to be on the job, but almost all of that activity is subconscious. So you're not aware of any brain activity at all. No processing is in your awareness, except perhaps a little bit of voluntary motor. But otherwise, everything is completely subconscious. Your conscious mind only gets some results of some of that processing that can pop up into that awareness. But no processing is in your awareness at all. And so you have to be okay with what we call being in a state of incubation. That is the technical term for it in psychology, where you stop thinking about something. Okay, my brain is full, I can't think about it anymore. And what happens when we're overwhelmed? We go into hypnosis, right? That is a hypnotic state. There are tons of inductions that use overwhelm as the way to get people into a hypnotic state. And so when you're in that state now, okay, you're not thinking about what's going on. You're not aware of what's going on. And so now you can go for a run, or you can work on another project, or you can read a book, or keep the conscious mind occupied with something else, babysit it with a book or something else while the rest of the brain works on this. And then at some point, you're going to have one of a couple things happen. Either you'll have an aha phenomenon where it's like, oh, boom, that's it. That's the answer. That just makes so much sense. Or you go back to the issue or the problem and you look at it again, and you're coming from a different perspective at that point, because there's been a lot of brain activity moving you into the direction of coming up with something different. And I always just tell people, remember what Albert Einstein once said: if at first the idea is not absurd, there's no hope for it. You have to let it go to absurd town in the subconscious and just like, okay, what if we did this, with aliens or something? Like, go to all kinds of crazy stuff. Let your brain come up with all kinds of weird stuff. And then at some point, something is going to, get something else going and something else going. And you're going to wind up as somewhere you've never been before with a truly innovative solution. And I remember hearing about Steve Jobs talking about this. And he said, and this is going to be a poor paraphrase, but essentially what he was saying was, creativity, it is like you're not really doing anything. People feel guilty almost for saying, I had this creative idea, because it's like they didn't actually come up with it. It's like there's something in their head that just kind of like put it up there, but it wasn't really them. And that's because it's a completely subconscious process.
Wow, this is amazing. I'm speechless. So I'm gonna incubate that. Thank you.
There you go.
I'm gonna incubate that, because I don't even have a follow up, but that was absolutely so well articulated. Thank you so much, Brian.
Yeah. So famous author, right? You have your practice. Someone needs they feel they have to go to hypnotherapy, but you're booked up and they can't get to you. What can they do in the interim on their own before? What are some things that they can do leading up to a session or in between sessions, or if they want to take themselves from the traditional route that they might have been using as therapy, right, or whatever they had been doing before, and now they want to see if this is what's going to help them with their trauma or whatever their ailment is. What can they do on their own, and maybe to even prep themselves for the experience and the process.
Yeah, so I have a few solutions for people. One is one of the complaints I had about the book that I just wrote, Reconstructing Reality, is that people wanted a lot of exercises of how to actually engage in some of the processes that I discuss in that book. And it wasn't meant to be a self-help book; it was a theoretical book. But I heard you, everybody that had that issue. I heard you, and there is now a Reconstructing Reality workbook that I just
Excellent.
published within the week. It just came out, and so get that. It's at introductory pricing right now, and please leave a review. But it's just a fun book. I just had a fun time writing it, and it's a place where you can fill some things in, and it's not just like questionnaires and stuff like that. It's a more interactive thing. The ebook and formal launch of everything is coming October 1st. And that's actually going to be, you're going to be able to click on something and have a video pop up or an audio file pop up to be able to experience some things. In the meantime, there you can go to my website, amyrosner.com. And if you scroll down just a short ways, you're going to see Join Us Free and a button underneath. And that you can make an account and sign into a free resource that has all of my audio files for medical issues and various things, for instructional videos. My entire self-hypnosis video course is in there. There's a self-love challenge that you focus on a different thing each month. And there are all kinds of things. There's Q&A discussion. It's an online community that's free for everyone. I just want everybody to have a safe place that they can go and ask all these questions and get as much help as I can give them. And then if you need more help, I take on some new clients, but not a lot. But I do a lot of mentoring. And so I love teaching more people how to do this kind of thing, because that's all the more people that I can indirectly help. And so I do have a mentoring program for anyone who would like to learn more about doing this and getting into this business. It's absolutely the most rewarding thing I've ever done, and I absolutely love it. And those who continue on after they finish the program as what I call associates have a place on my website. You can go to the team page and you can see the people who are working with me. And you can book a session with one of them. Maybe one of them resonates with you better than I do. And they have all different backgrounds. They're a very diverse group of people. We have a small but very passionate community, and we all share the same philosophies of change and of healing.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Excellent. Do you have that's so great, and so actionable, right? There's a lot of things that people can do right there. Are there things, session to session, right? So you talked about how the changes to even really difficult traumas can happen so quickly, right? If it's done properly, and there's the connection is made there. What can people do in between sessions, in between working on themselves and really focusing to maintain those gains and maintain that progress? What can they do are there some things that they can do on their own before they come back to you or whoever they're working with, so they don't fall back down there, that rewiring, that's maybe not totally constructed in the cathedral, and the new superhighway hasn't been totally solidified. What can they do so that doesn't fade away, and so they don't fall back into the old patterns and the old mapping?
So this is one of the great things about these kinds of brain hacks, is that they're permanent. There is
Wow.
no not quite done, not quite solidified. That doesn't exist. It's not the way the brain works. And so you either change a connection or you don't. It's the brain. The brain just is a lot. It sounds weird to say it's put together in a simple way because it's the most complex thing on the planet. But there is some simplicity when you look at it this way. That when you do make a change, it's not like a chemical agent, a medication that wears off after a while. So you have to keep taking another dose and another dose at a certain time. The changes made by hypnotherapy are structural in nature, not chemical. And so, for example, if someone is taking opiate medication for pain, and you give them Narcan, that's going to take away the pain mediation, and they're going to feel pain again because that was a completely chemical means of stopping pain. On the other hand, if you use hypnotherapy for pain and you give them Narcan, they still don't feel any pain because it's a structural change, not a chemical one. And if you do change something, and the maladaptive behavior or thought or feeling or whatever comes back at some other point, it will not be coming from whatever that past event was that caused it in the first place. It will be coming from something new. And most likely that won't even happen either, because you've been making other changes around that sort of scenario that are now going to keep you from being able to even go to that maladaptive place in the first place. So you don't have to do anything to try to keep changes made in a hypnosis session going, because they're there. They're not going to go anywhere. Now, if you go home and talk to your husband about what you did in your session, and you're still in that hypnotic state because it takes a while before you're out of that state after a session, and that person is saying, "Oh, you don't really believe in that, do you? You don't really think you made that kind of change, do you?" Then what you can find is that there can be some reprogramming in the wrong direction that happens at that point. That can actually happen, and I've seen that to various degrees. But that's really easy to get past in the next session. Take the first 5 minutes to correct that, and then move on. There's nothing that you need to do to keep an effect there, because it's already there. It's not going anywhere. However, if you're dealing with something that's more complex, getting past trauma, getting past some self-image sorts of issues, that sort of thing, then it's more than just one change in the hypnotherapist recliner. It's going to be and I've heard you say this, Sarah, it's like an onion with layers, right? And so, each one of those layers is going to require probably 3 to 6 sessions to get past. It may be limiting beliefs, and maybe fight or flight responses, various things like that. Each of those is going to take its own time to get past. A lot of things just take one session. You get rid of a fight or flight response in one single session. 30 minutes, and you don't have that response anymore if you're using NLP. So a lot of things are just immediate, but between sessions, let's say you get rid of the fight or flight response from a traumatic event, and we haven't gotten to any of the limiting beliefs yet that have come from that. Between, and you can't get in for a month for another session, that's fine. You can, a lot of people, well, I don't know that a lot of people do this. I always give some optional homework, what we call accelerators. You don't have to use them. The programming is already where it needs to be, but just reinforcing that so that the rest of your brain understands, okay, this has changed. So it's like upgrading to a big new operating system. All the plugins and apps need to now be able to work with that new operating system, right? And so sometimes it's weird. One person said, I went to this meeting and somebody was saying something to me that I did something incorrectly. And I immediately stood up for myself. And she said, that's the first time. She was in her 60s. She said, that's the first time I can ever recall standing up for myself. And she took a step back and said, wait a minute, that was weird. Where did that come from? And then she's thinking about, well, maybe it's from this book I read, or from this or from that. And then it's like, no, it came from your subconscious mind. That's why you don't understand where it came from, because it's from under the surface, right? And it's what we had been working on.
Yeah.
So in the interim, your brain is doing a lot of work on its own. Just, what I call accommodation. It's making the new programming feel at home. It's letting everything in your head work with that new programming. And so some things, if you've decided that in this kind of situation, you're no longer unsafe, then there are a lot of other kinds of, similar situations that you may find yourself in where you have been bringing up that feeling of being unsafe, and that feeling doesn't exist in your head anymore. So now what is it going to do? Now you have to reconstruct those different kinds of situations in your head so that they fall in line with this lack of feeling unsafe that is now existing in that head. So those are the kind of things that need to happen if you do want to. And for things like habit change and some medical issues, sometimes it's really nice to keep your head focused as often as you can on the change you want to make. So if you just had surgery, you need to keep your brain focused on healing. Keep your whole immune system just focused on healing. So you can't be thinking about, what are the kids going to be eating tonight? Is the husband going to be able to use the toaster or the oven or whatever? You need to just like let things go, and your whole job needs to be healing. Right. And so you can use a recording or something like that. A recording is a really good way to just have that, hypnotherapist with you all the time. You can get a custom recording made. I do not record sessions for a variety of reasons. And actually, if I'm doing my job, then they're useless by the end of the session because they're past that already. So there's no reason for it. But I'll do a custom recording sometimes for medical issues, so that, and sometimes for habit change, so that I'm there with them all the time, and they can just beat it into their head, this kind of brute force reprogramming, I call it. The more it's there, the less you're going to wander off to other things, right? And so for habit change, stopping smoking, for example, things like that, the classic, hypno utilization, having a recording can be really good because you're maybe you are stopped. You're now considering yourself a non-smoker after a couple sessions, 1 or 2 sessions, but now you're seeing everybody else around you smoking. They're trying to get you to smoke again because that's what people do, and just having that recording where you keep focusing on your health and the things you want to focus on can just reinforce the entire system that's now changing around this new programming. So there's definitely some things you can do from session to session to take charge and start moving even more forward past where you stopped at the end of the session. You can keep going forward.
Yeah, the operating system and the plugins and the different applications, that was a great analogy. I think that from the outside looking in, one of the real selling points to hypnotherapy, and it's been evidenced, by the discussion that you guys have had, and what separates it from pharmaceuticals and traditional sit down, kind of talk therapy, not that there's not a place for that depending on the situation and the people, is the permanence. And you talked about it earlier on and then now. And I think a lot of people don't really understand that. And hopefully they do after this conversation. A lot of our audience members are going to see, the it's there's not, you had mentioned there the side effects, there's minimal negative side effects and no danger potentially. And then two, and I think more importantly, is the permanence, that synaptic rewiring, right? Like changing the actual the brain itself, and where these roads that the neurotransmitters travel on is different than an external, like you said, chemical that needs to be replenished and that needs to be repeated over and over again. Or that conversation, let's go talk about your mom for year 23, right? Again, next Tuesday, I'll see you again and we'll talk about the same thing again, right? So to me, that is almost such a relief, and that should break the barriers down that people might have, or the trepidation or the apprehension that they might have starting something different, because it's going to be maybe less of a long-term commitment and safer, and it's going to give them permanence. So I think that's just wonderful, and hopefully people are listening and it's getting through. Tara, go ahead.
Now, hopefully, one of the downsides of that, though, as fast as it works and as completely as it works, very often, not all the time, but very often, is that it seems too good to be true.
Yeah.
And a lot of people just can't believe that you can actually. I've had a fear of snakes my entire life, and last time I saw a picture on a phone of a snake, I threw my phone across the room and it broke. This is an actual case of mine. And there's no
Not
way
laughing.
that in one session you're going to get me to like snakes.
Right.
And yes.
Yeah.
That absolutely is a one session fix. Very seldom would it not be. Now, if you were terrorized by your sister, another client of mine, with snakes growing up, now that's a more complex issue, because now not only do you have a fear of snakes, which is a very real thing to have a fear to, but it's an unreasonable fear. But also now you have limiting beliefs. Here's someone who should love me and want to protect me, and she's putting me in harm's way. If my own family can't love me, then maybe how can anybody else love me, right? And so there are all these, the ancillary problems that come about because of that. That might be a 6 or even 12 session fix, right? So it just depends on how complex, the cause is. But many things are just really incredibly simple, much more so than people think they should, because they feel like they're not. They feel like, man, I haven't been able to get past this my entire life. How can you help me get past it in, one or a handful of sessions? And so that disbelief is something that, coaching is good for that. And then also doing hypnosis without hypnosis, without doing hypnosis, like with classically speaking, with an induction and that sort of thing, can come in handy more, a la Milton Erickson, where you're having a conversation and you can help that person into a trance state just with what you're saying and how you're saying it, using what you're hearing and observing from that client, in a way that can help that client go into that state and get some work done in that state. Even just asking someone about how they feel about themselves, asking if they can see themselves in the future doing certain things, asking about a past memory of theirs. All of these things are moving that person like immediately into a hypnotic state, and a lot of people don't realize that. And so there are people like myself, there are therapists that use hypnotherapy, there are coaches like myself that use it. When we see somebody that we know we're putting that person into more of a hypnotic place, then we're going to do something about that. We're going to take advantage of that and be able to really help that person to make a change at a transformative, level. But a lot of people do not use those techniques, and so they can't really do anything at that point. There's not a whole lot they can do. There's a big difference in the course of that intervention, if someone's using those kinds of brain hacks or not. And so it's kind of like, you don't have to be like in meditation, for example, to be in a hypnotic state. Those are two completely different states. And so, like meditation, you're relaxing, you're going in from beta to alpha wave activity, and you're receptive, you're open, you're taking in whatever you can. And if you just move that slightly into let your brain do whatever the hell it wants, let it go wherever it wants to go and do whatever it wants to do. Now it becomes self-hypnosis, and now you're back in beta. Okay. So you're actually in that waking brain activity. However, you are visually in meditation. Like you look like you have not gone anywhere. You may be lacrimating, have tears coming into your eyes. You have, less tone to your skin. All of those things you're looking for someone in a hypnotic state, they're all there. The person they're probably going to remember most of it. There may be some they don't, because they've gotten rid of some programming that didn't serve them that had to do with those things. And so you see all the impact at the end of it. And yet they've gone from, just being an alpha to going back to beta, which tells me that, hypnosis, whether self or not, and when you think about it, it's all self, because I can't put anyone in hypnosis. They're doing it themselves. But that is like meditation on steroids, because you're going from a meditative state to this place where you're really getting some work done. And you feel it afterwards. At the end of a session, a lot of people will say, like, wow, either I'm really energized, or man, I feel worn out. Like, your brain's using, almost 20% of the fuel in your body. And so, and the energy. And so if you're doing a lot of work up here, like after taking a big exam or something, you're going to feel tired. And so a lot of people say that being in this state is kind of like, taking an hour-long nap or something, because you're actually like, you're in a different kind of place. Only it's a natural place, and you're getting a lot of work done in a very short period of time. And it's not taking any concentration on your part.
Right.
You have someone to lead you. And it's actually really the only ill effects I have ever seen from doing any kind of self-help have been from people using like self-help books on their own. And this happened to one of my clients. She was using some kind of self-help book, and she said that she came to a few realizations about herself that she wasn't happy with. And then she took a nap on the couch, and she woke up feeling extremely down and bad. Like she was talking like maybe suicidal, but she wasn't seriously suicidal, for the first time in her life. And I said, okay, put the book down, and then, come in tomorrow morning, and let's see if we can get rid of some of this negative feeling that's going on with you. And we did that. And that taught me that, if you're going to start going down this path of self-exploration, you need to really be careful sometimes. And if you're in a hypnotherapist office, or a therapist office, or anybody else that is, trained in helping someone if they're going down a bad road, then you have someone there to pull you out by the ears if you start going down that rabbit hole, right? But if you're on your own, there's nobody there to pull you out and make sure that you're okay. So it's actually a lot safer to do this, with somebody that you resonate with, whether it's traditional therapist, hypnotherapist, whatever, rather than trying to do it on your own, especially when it's deep stuff. If it's little stuff, that's fine. That's not going to be a big deal. But yeah.
And that, I love all of that and can resonate with it. And I think that's why coaching and hypnotherapy go together so well, is because, similarly, the only time that there was something maybe negative and I wouldn't even say negative, is when the change does happen so rapidly and it doesn't match those that are around them. And the people around them are like, well, what do you mean you don't have this habit anymore? What do you mean
you start to find out, how people really feel about you at that point. So do you really want me to be better, or don't you?
So that's where the support, definitely the coaching. I'm that's why I incorporate coaching into the hypnosis, is because you will change. You will that the change is it's easy. It can be very easy. It's
right.
Adapting to the new identity of yourself and how others are going to perceive that and support you or fall away.
Right.
So I
absolutely 100%.
Yep. That's so huge. And then one more point I was laughing at is when because it seems like you might have a client, or have had clients like this, where they're like, yeah, it's amazing. I can't believe, like, I'm not afraid of this, or yeah, I lost this weight, or I'm a good public speaker. And it's like, we were working on that. And it's so funny. It must have been this, I must have had a good night's sleep, or I must have been.
Your conscious mind is going to look for explanations in different places.
Right, yeah. What could this be? And it's so funny because they don't correlate the fact that it was that instantaneous in the session that it
Right.
inform them. So yeah, I always have to sometimes I remind them, and sometimes it's like that motherly, okay, if they want to think that they thought their way through it, that's fine. But yeah,
Right.
thank you for sharing that. That's wonderful, because I agree with you. I think that there are very rarely any quote unquote negative side effects. One last question would be, how can someone find a good mentor like yourself, or what do they look for when searching for a hypnotherapist or hypnotherapist program?
So I really think that background and experience have a lot to do with it. There there are people that can have a dozen certifications in various programs, but what are they really focused on? So I think. Unfortunately, we're kind of eating our own here in the coaching industry and the hypno industry, because it can be difficult to make a living doing this, unless you really are doing a great job, and you feel comfortable with your sessions, and you continue moving forward, and you're really dedicated to it. But a lot of times our self-doubt seeps in, and it can be difficult to put ourselves out there as much as we need to really build up a practice in a short period of time. And I mean, I had a great husband who would, he'd talk me down off the ledge every time I needed it. Whenever the first few years where I'm like, the well's going to dry up. I know the well's going to dry up. What am I going to do? The well never dried up. It just kept getting better and better. And then I stopped worrying about it. But you need to find somebody that has actually been, down this road, and is successful, and that you resonate with. Yeah. And so, if somebody is, not seeing a whole lot of clients, or they haven't been doing this very long, or it's a big organization that you're more of a number than a name, you're probably not going to get as much out of that program as maybe you could from something more like this. Is why I have a mentoring program, because I went to a fantastic training program, and I would recommend it to anyone. However, once I got out of that training program, I felt totally lost. I felt like I was just adrift, a boat adrift on the sea, had no idea what to do. And other people, from my class had told me the same thing, that they felt that way as well. And I see that online a lot too. People who are just starting, they, took, a bargain course, in hypnotherapy or whatever, and now they have some tools and they want to make a living at it, and their head's in the right place, their heart's in the right place, but they have no idea what to do. Yeah. And so I'm offering in my mentoring program, people work directly with me. So I can only take, maybe a couple people a month, and that's about it. But I prefer to do that, because I don't want to have just, an online course. Okay, this will teach you how to do a few things, and then you're on your own. I actually extend it into what I call an associate's program after they graduate. And they graduate automatically having International Hypnosis Association certification in both hypnotherapy and NLP for life. They get it for life. So they never have to do any other programs or anything if they don't want to, unless they're interested in learning something else, which I'm always really, happy about. I think I'm an education hound. I want everybody else to be too. I want people to learn as much as they can about things. What I don't like seeing, though, is people having, special, get certified in this special, kind of thing, with some acronym on it. And it's something that no one's heard of before. Not that it's not effective, but I have yet to see one of those programs that's really qualitatively different from the tried and true hypno and NLP techniques that have been around for 150 years, right? Yeah. And so there's very little that's new, but a lot of people will say that they have new things that you can get certified in, and now you can put yourself out there in a niche in the market. My way of solving this issue of, being able to throw a stone and hitting 10 coaches or hypnotherapists is that, you do need to carve out a place in the market, and you do that by being authentically you. Whatever your background is, whatever your skills are, whatever you enjoy, you are a yoga practitioner. That is an amazing addition to a hypnotherapy practice, in my opinion. I don't do that. I love that you do. Some of the people who've worked with me are yoga teacher certified, and they incorporate that into their practice. Some do breath work. Some do tapping, some do Tai Chi, they have a broad range of things that they do, and they incorporate those things in together, and they have special programs that are unlike any others that are out there. That's how they carve out their niche in the market.
I love that.
So that's what I want to help people do, is to not only get up and running really quickly, but to have a signature program. And by program, I don't mean, let's do this for, 6 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever, and then, see where you are. This is more of a, okay, I'm here to help you one-on-one, custom, just for you. We are going to hit things that you want to change. We're going to hit them quickly and get past them. And it's not a program per se, but I have a signature kind of session. I do things a certain way, and you're not going to find this group of techniques or this experience in anybody else in the field. So that's what I help people do. And I think it's been very successful. And I just absolutely love that group of people that have been going on that ride with me since I started doing it. If you're looking for a hypnotherapist to do sessions with, again, certification can tell you. Now, there's a famous example of somebody who certified their cat in the 3 biggest certification agencies in hypnotherapy. And that was a little while back. That was 10 years ago or so. But yes, anybody can get certified in any of this stuff. You can be a complete idiot in this stuff, not have any idea what you're doing, and be certified. And you don't even need certification. There's no need for it. Anybody can put a sign in their yard and say, I'm a coach or I'm a hypnotherapist. But if you have certification, it just shows that you have had to take some coursework. You have had to show that you have some experience with some of this in order to get that certification. And it shows that you are running your business and your practice by a certain set of ethical guidelines. And those 2 things I think are important. But, again, anybody can get certified. So look at the person's background, look at what they focus on, look at, what their philosophy is, see if you resonate with it, even with the picture that's on the bio page, right? Do you resonate with that picture? And then you should be able to do a free consultation or discovery session with that person. And I would strongly recommend you do that. And just be really upfront and really, see how you interact with that person. Because there's a lot of people to choose from, and we all do things differently and are going to have different ideal clients, and that's the way it should be.
Absolutely. That beautifully said, beautifully said. So we could talk forever, but we must end with the best, the Reconstructing Your Reality, the book. Tell us about the book.
So the book is just detailing some of the concepts that we actually hit on in our discussion today about how the brain, what is the neuroscience and neuropsychology of that reconstructive process, and how do subconsciously oriented brain hacks like hypnosis and NLP actually tap into that natural reconstructive system. So the whole book is putting together my experience in my practice with these brain hacks, with my education and experience in experimental neuropsychology, where I focused on visual attention and memory. And so it all kind of goes together, and it all kind of comes, together in that book.
All right. Well, buy it. Even if you aren't interested, you will learn so much about yourself, or not.
There are a lot of case studies in the book, so you can probably see yourself or others in the book and the case studies.
And at your website, or on Amazon, or both?
On Amazon. If you go to my website, you can get to my Amazon author page from there. But it's for sale on Amazon, and the workbook is also for sale on Amazon. There's a series page. You can see both of them if you get to one or the other.
Beautiful.
That's wonderful that you listened to the audience and you added that. I'm sure you were like done writing the book and you're like, now I got to write another one. But that's amazing, and it just shows how much you care and how much you appreciate and connect with the feedback that you're getting. So we'll definitely leave all those links in the show notes. But I've definitely learned a lot, and I really appreciate it. Definitely keep in touch, Tara.
I'm a huge fan for life, so I can't wait to connect again.
I would love that. And thank you guys so much. I've just thoroughly enjoyed talking to both of you. And I just think you're both great, and good luck with your podcast. I think you hit on some really cool stuff. I enjoyed listening to some of the other interviews before I got to do mine. So great seeing both of you.
Thank you so much,
Amy.
Amy. Take care.